You're listening to Contesting Wrestling, a podcast where, look, I'm a person, and I live in the world.
Arguably.
Statistically, that's enough out of you. Statistically, you almost definitely also fit that description. And you and I may notice there's a lot of wrestling also here in the world amongst the other elements and objects and concepts and stuff. I shake my fist at God and I say, "What up with this?" And I receive no answer before I have been abandoned. Look, I've been fucking real busy with school. I'm like stressed out. I'm high as shit. This is Contesting Wrestling. I'm Evan Burke. This is a podcast where we try to figure out where I want to understand why wrestling is considered good, quote unquote good, by others. And then I have enlisted two of my oldest and closest friends, both of whom are so firmly in the wrestling is good camp that they, in some capacity or another, have dedicated their professional livelihoods to varying degrees of percentages to wrestling as a profession. It's fine. Now, maybe you're like me. Maybe you're like, what? Why would anybody do this? And then maybe you're like the opposite of me, and you're like, suck it, Evan. You should like wrestling. And then I would make the suck it motion, but even though it's a podcast and there's no visual component, it is still very protected legally by the WWE, and I would be sued immediately.
You would also be undermining your own position by like using a wrestling thing.
No, but this is what the opposite of me says to regular me.
Okay.
This is mirror.
I tell you to suck it.
Mirror Universe Evan, who doesn't have a beard and does have a full lustrous head of hair, he would say to me, "Suck it and enjoy wrestling." And so that's a very long-winded way of saying it in this podcast. These guys try to get me to understand what's good about wrestling, and hopefully you can take something away from that, regardless of your position. And if you can't, I got nothing for you. I don't know what to do.
You don't have two words for us?
Suck me, which appears to be which appears to be the legally acceptable version of suck it that most of the rest of the wrestling world has taken on, has adopted, and it's so much weirder and grosser than suck it.
We'll give a shout out to Pinky Sanchez on the suck me front. That's suck me Pinky. He's quite a good follow. My name is Doc Diamondfire. I've been involved in professional wrestling for about a dozen years or so, and now I'm going to talk to you about it from that position. Professor, who are you?
I'm Dr. Ben Abelson, professor of philosophy at Mercy College, and someone who tells Evan to suck it and watch wrestling.
Yeah, or just recreationally.
Everyone, gotta give it a shot.
It was in fashion for some time just to throw out several suckets, but I don't think it's quite as in fashion these days.
Yes, to the
that's okay.
To the relief of many elementary and junior high school teachers around the world, I believe.
Yes.
Kids these days are just texting each other the suck it emoji. That's what's happening. So I will say today, as much as in my whole little opening rant, I was like, wrestling, those are other negative sounds. Today we are covering the boss, Bruce Springsteen, who was beaten to death by Brock Lesnar.
You just,
And then I watched that video of Brock Lesnar just fucking hammering Bruce Springsteen's face while Max Weinberg sits there jerking off. No, all right, so we're doing Sasha Banks.
I try to be very detailed when I post the information to watch the matches for the show, but Evan just always seems to misinterpret it somehow.
Yeah, it's not that I can't read, it's that I refuse to read.
I've never known you to listen to Springsteen.
I'm in the category of Nebraska is a cool album. That's my feeling.
I am aggressively neutral towards Springsteen.
Yeah, that's
for somebody who grew up around where Springsteen was so big.
I never liked Springsteen, and then I went to a U2 concert where Springsteen came out and played 2 songs with them.
Oh, that's cool.
And as soon as I heard him sing live, I was like, oh, okay, that's why people love this dude.
He is one of those guys that built his career on doing 4.5-hour live shows every night.
I will say I did when after Prince died and everybody like over the next couple weeks released their versions of Purple Rain or something. Springsteen's was all right. Cool. Yeah, Nebraska was. I don't know. I was into Tom Waits, and I felt like that filled the hole for me that Springsteen fills for a lot of people. So, but Sasha Banks, Sasha Banks. This has been brewing for a while. Sasha Banks was in one of the matches we covered in our third episode.
Yeah,
and
Sasha and Bailey. In 2 of the matches for today.
Having learned a lot more about wrestling since that time, I was really able to appreciate this a lot more because, man, she's fucking awesome. She really does have the whole. One of these matches I was not as nuts about.
Well, one of them I picked to be the bad match for a couple of reasons.
Okay.
But I love Sasha Banks. She's one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. I could just watch her matches endlessly. I think, in particular, this match with Ronda Rousey is one of my very favorite matches of the last 5 years or so. I think when we covered the Ronda-Charlotte match, I was like, that was Ronda's best match. At the time, I had forgotten how fucking awesome this one is. It's just everything that I love about wrestling, really. Or not everything, but a lot of the things that I love about wrestling in one match. But all right, I guess let's start with the NXT stuff. So we watched a match from NXT TakeOver Rival in 2015. Sasha Banks versus Bailey versus Becky Lynch versus Charlotte for the NXT Women's title, which at the beginning of the match was held by Charlotte. And this match is where Sasha finally, after several attempts, finally wins the NXT Women's Championship. I guess let's just go. Evan, why don't you tell us what you think about this match?
Yeah.
To start off.
All right, so a couple things. Overall, really like this match. I was concerned at first that 4 people is edging onto clusterfuck territory, and I was a little worried about that. I thought that the 4 of them pulled it off really well. I thought that there was a lot of chemistry. They broke off into sections really well. I have to say, as much as I really liked Sasha Banks, and by the end she was the star of this match, I feel like the star of the first half of this match is Becky Lynch, because this was actually some of the most. Lynch is always great whenever we've seen her, but I felt particularly impressed by her in this match. I just in terms of the speed, the power. I noticed that they are still using the term divas here, so I guess we're still in sort of a transitional period.
Oh yes.
Of women's
they
wrestling.
were still divas until they were all on the main roster, and then finally at WrestleMania 32, over a year after this, they got rid of the divas thing.
They still hadn't really moved over to a more serious style on the main roster yet. It was in the process of happening, but they really tested it thoroughly on NXT. They had NXT be well ahead of that curve.
And it was after this match that they started talking about the 4 horsewomen. These 4, this is where they really cemented that they were the vanguard.
They do wrestle like they have something to prove here. There is a level of energy and ferocity that you feel like it's a bit of a we need to show what we're capable of, what can happen. And I feel like they do a great job of everybody sharing the spotlight. Everybody gets to do cool shit. You still feel the forcefulness of all of their characters.
I will say though about Becky, she was always awesome in the ring. I think she was probably the first of the 4 to really master the in-ring stuff, because she had been on the indies a lot longer than everybody else. But even at this point, I think her character was still really not there at all. She was coming out and headbanging and throwing up the devil horns and stuff, which she still kind of does and never really made sense. So she was still finding her identity. But I agree. In ring, she was really masterful already.
And she has there's an element of feeling like she's dangerous that none of the other 3 have. Everybody has their own characteristic definitely. Did Sasha and Charlotte like did they have a lot of one-on-one matches?
Yeah, we watched one of their earlier one-on. We watched Sasha's first shot at Charlotte's title.
Okay.
From NXT R Revolution, and Charlotte won that. And then they had another title match. Then they had a tag match, I think, where Sasha finally pinned Charlotte. And then they had another one-on-one match that Becky ended up breaking up. And so this is all sort of leading to the four-way.
Because I do like their dynamic is interesting because their characters are sort of two versions of the same concept. It's the boss and the queen.
They came from the same stable. They were both in the BFFs, the Beautiful Fierce Females, under Summer Rae, who was their leader at the time. I was trying to find a BFFs promo that could really give you a good idea of what Sasha was like before she really started to find herself.
Yeah, those are interesting.
But I couldn't find a really great exemplar, largely because in those promos she didn't talk very much. It's mostly Summer talking,
And sometimes I think just recreationally I'd like to start watching NXT from the beginning of this version of NXT again. Because it's been a number of years. The show has changed, and now it really is like, oh, look at all these guys. Look at them all before they became huge stars.
I didn't remember that Sasha and Charlotte had been competing regularly on NXT since 2013.
Yeah, they've been in the WWE for a long time now.
And definitely where I feel like Sasha shines the most out of these four is that, everybody's got their characteristics and stuff, and they all, still developed into something more. Sasha feels the most complete as a character here. At least to me, like, it feels like she is already... She would refine this character as time goes on, but she already has her particular flavor of self-assurance and style that go with the boss character. That whereas the other three, I feel like you sort of feel. I guess Bayley is also kind of there in her character too, but her character is not meant to be a forceful character.
But Sasha's in-ring work too. It's really innovative.
Yeah.
Her storytelling skills are great. I was thinking about this. I heard someone say that a really good wrestling match, you actually don't remember that much about afterwards because you were just absorbed in it. But I think a great wrestling match, you remember everything. And that was something that Bret Hart had. Every single one of his matches, you remembered what happened. He told a distinct story. And I think of anyone in the wrestling business today, Sasha Banks has that.
Her style feels more like sport than a lot of other wrestling. At least to me, her style feels a lot more like traditional mat work or something, for lack of a better. She feels more trained in a classical wrestling style or something. I don't know if that's true or not, but the feeling is a lot more like that, and I feel like she has that and such a refined character, and that's really rare.
I think in terms of the wrestling stuff, she's trained extensively with the Amazing Red, especially in recent years, and I think he's had a lot to do with it. From what I've heard, he worked with both Sasha and Ronda on that match, on the Sasha versus Ronda match. Anyway, yeah.
Well, what I was going to say is, as far as Sasha's physicality in the ring goes, she doesn't waste any movement, which is something that a lot of people say. But what I mean by that is that every time she moves her body or her limbs, there's a reason for it. She wants the people to notice that she's moved like that so that they think something. She's wrestling thinking about the people observing her, which is the correct way to do it. She has some cool moves, but she's not thinking, oh man, I'm so cool for doing these moves. She's thinking, how can I get the crowd to react to my moves? How can I make them think I'm great? How can I make them sympathize with me? How can I take them to where I'm going? And that's what I think some of the women in this match didn't quite have yet. I think Becky finally ascended to the top because she finally picked that up and executed it properly. She got over by bleeding out her face and doing a promo, not having the best matches of her career. Not that she's not having the best matches of her career, right before she started her hiatus, but my point is made there.
Yeah, I mean, these women all have signature moves, but none of it them like that's as Doc was pointing out, that's not what they're known for. That's not really what pops out to you when you're watching the match.
No, and that's in this match. It felt like, I mean, like what left out to me the most was like Becky's abandon, where Becky's like throwing people around a lot more in a very forceful way, and then Sasha has a combination of technicality and style that seems hard to overcome too. I mean, I guess that's who you are if you're the boss, right?
Well, to your point about her style being more sports-like, she always also seems like she wants to win. Everything she does is towards, I want to win this match to beat them because I need to prove to the people that I'm the best. Not to say that we need to wrap on this match, but the finish of the match, the post-match, she wins, she gets the belt. Charlotte goes in for like the handshake and the hug, and Sasha accepts it for just a second. And then she shoves Charlotte away and holds the belt up, to show the people and she shows the people her face. And her face says, "Yeah, I'm the best. Screw you."
She also wins with a cool, maybe this is a thing that happens more in wrestling, but she wins with a cool fucking pin that I've never seen.
Yeah.
I've never seen anybody pin someone while also physically being underneath them.
Well, so that's a crucifix pin, and it's fairly common, but not in that particular context. And this is what I was drawing attention to earlier by comparing her to Bret Hart. Like, that is a distinctive finish for that match. She couldn't tap out Charlotte with the bank statement, but she had done enough damage that she could do the quick crucifix out of the bank statement, and she was able to get the quick pin, which allowed her, she actually beat Charlotte, so she pinned the champion in order to win the title.
Yeah, that's significant.
It's totally significant, but at the same time, because she didn't tap her to the bank statement, there's still something to be proved. And as you mentioned, Evan, this is a great rivalry between the two of them, and it kept going a lot once they got to the main roster together. And in the premium, we'll watch one of their main roster matches as well.
Well, a complaint that fans have had about the WWE Women's Division over the last couple of years that is not without merit is that it's still about these four women a lot of the time. And Asuka. Well, that's a function of the fact that they rode the expansion of the women's division up to the top. It's not time for any of the four of them to step aside because none of the four of them are done ascending yet because their ceiling keeps getting higher and higher, which is the opposite of the story of women's wrestling the entire rest of the time there's been wrestling. So they keep adding women underneath her, but the four of them seem untoppable.
Though Becky did step aside on her own.
Becky stepped aside on her own. Whenever she decides to come back, it's going to be a big deal. Right, and it's not like they've held all the rest of the women away. Right, there's Asuka, Alexa Bliss, of course, established herself, and Nikki Cross, and the rest of the women's division, Naomi. The rest of the women's division is great. That's better than the men's division in the WWE, and on all brands. I'll say that.
So, I mean, part of what I want to talk about in this episode and how we set up the matches to tell this kind of story is the fact that for Sasha, it hasn't been as smooth of a ride up the ladder as it was for Charlotte. And it wasn't really that smooth for Becky either, but she found her way a little bit faster. But we'll get into that as we go along. But I just wanted to point that out at this point because you're right, Doc, that these four have just continued to elevate the entire division. We the conversation. There was no conversation about women main eventing WrestleMania, before these four.
I do wonder if a personal motivation for Sasha is because she didn't have connections the way that that Charlotte or members of other wrestling families had or something like that.
Yeah. I mean,
but
she is Snoop Dogg's cousin, but
and I wonder if
he is a WWE Hall of Famer.
Oh right, okay, all right.
Sure.
So it's not
it's not like Ric Flair,
Exactly.
Right.
But I wonder if some of the extra ferocity and drive in her comes from the people know that I kind of had an in here, so I need to prove that much more that I also deserve to be here, which I feel like is not in question that she deserves to be there.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
but-
she's
Yeah,
also
of course she does.
undersized. She's not really tall like Charlotte is. She's not as muscular as Becky Lynch is. Her ascension in NXT came as a surprise, and that was kind of
Yeah.
what was so special about it.
There was a wide bunch of women in NXT. They had started a few years before this, signing up a lot of women because the elevation of their women's division was a long-term plan, which is one of the reasons why it was so successful. They were like, okay, over the next several years, we're going to give women more prominent places on television, and it starts on NXT. So there were a lot of women that could have broken out of the pack. And yeah, Sasha was not one of the top ones. She was, she had no real character on her. She was Sasha Banks in her tights. And then like her gimmick started to grow, but at first when she started putting on all of her extra stuff, as I like to say, she looked like a little girl that got into like her auntie's dress cabinet and put a bunch of makeup and jewelry on, and it looked kind of ridiculous. But she refined that quickly. Every
She's
time you
grown
saw
into
her
it,
on TV, yeah, every time you saw her on TV, she looked less ridiculous and more like she owned that look and that style, and she did.
And if you notice for this match, she gets the biggest pop of
Oh, yeah.
anyone coming out. The crowd was organically getting behind her, despite the fact that she was the heel.
Right.
But it worked. The fact that the crowd got behind her didn't mean that they weren't any less supportive of the other three. Or, I don't know, I guess Becky was also a heel, and they weren't quite behind her. But, yeah, it didn't diminish Bayley's babyfaceness that a lot of people like Sasha. And that, I think, really helped for this movement of the four of them altogether.
Something that consistently surprises me that is not something I would have thought about wrestling before we started this is how much more brutal it is watching a bunch of 150-pound women throw each other around. 110 to 150 pound
It's a
women.
real
Like,
problem.
like it's like they because it just the second like at one point Becky Lynch like straight up like hurls Sasha, hurls her, and it's
Yeah.
really effective. But I'm like, that looks like that is doing more proportional damage to Sasha than it looks when like the Undertaker throws another huge guy.
Well, to reflect on that, Sasha has had a lot of injuries over the years. It's been one of the reasons her career has been so stop-start.
Serious spinal problems.
Yeah, man,
Already.
it's like you can see like when they hit like all of them, like when they hit something, like
Yeah.
I don't know, like it's just it's pain. It's both painful to watch, but then it's also like, oh, this is a lot more affecting on that primal level
Yeah.
that wrestling is affecting, where you're watching it and you're just like, oh shit, like that's really what, you know what I mean? Like if somebody, whatever, if the Big Show gets hurt, you're like, I mean, how much can that really hurt? And but when it's like when like Bayley,
If the Big Show is
hits-
listening to this, that's at Evan Burke ETC. You can tell him how much your various injuries have hurt you over the years.
I will tell
being
him
such
that
a large man.
over the internet. But like I know when you see Bayley hit something and she just like folds in half the wrong way, it's like it's just, holy shit! It's
Yeah.
very primal.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah, Paige retired at 23 with neck problems, you know. And it wasn't like some big instance that caused it. It was just wear and tear, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, we're getting some breaking news that Katie is not on this episode sent me. Is the Sasha Banks posted a video today challenging Io Shirai to a match at the Great American Bash edition of NXT for the NXT title.
Fuck yeah.
That's gonna be good.
Wanna
I'll
see
watch
that
that.
shit.
I
They're
don't watch.
kind of my two favorite people. Them and Oscar are my favorite people.
I honestly have not been watching much WWE. I've been watching like the pay-per-views, and I've been catching the odd NXT. I'll watch that. I'll totally watch that. I do want to keep watching the New Japan Cup, but that's not what we're talking about here.
The only piece of wrestling news I got recently that was interesting was I did see that Chris Jericho has sworn that he will face Orange Cassidy sometime soon.
Oh yeah, that story is happening.
That's
That's going to happen in a couple of weeks. Yeah, that's they've been. I've seen a little of that. They got me with that. They
yeah.
got me.
I'm excited. I'm deeply
Yeah.
excited. So we can we move on to the second match?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
so let me set it up a little bit.
Yeah.
So Sasha gets called up to Raw, to the main roster. She's on it for a while. She feuds with Charlotte. She has this sort of strained relationship with Bayley. But as Doc pointed out, she keeps getting injured, so none of those stories really pan out. eventually the fans start clamoring for women's tag team titles. Well, actually, that's the later part of the story. Before all of that, Sasha ends up, she comes in and out. She's largely used as a kind of utility player. And this is an example of that. They needed Ronda to have a big match leading into WrestleMania. And this is the same Royal Rumble card, Royal Rumble 2019, where Asuka wrestled Becky. We covered that match. So they need a big match for Ronda, and so they put her up against Sasha. And they have a fucking incredible match. So, anyway, yeah. What did you want to say, Evan?
What do you think of this one?
Man, all right. So I think that, somebody would need to put this to the test. But I think that if you have a friend who is a woman who is like, I always kind of thought wrestling would be cool, but like, I don't know, are there like good women's matches ever? Because I don't want to see, I feel like this is like this, you would show this match to them to get them into wrestling, because I feel like this is, it's just a great fucking match. It's fast and it's athletic and it's brutal and it's high energy, and they instantly, the second they are both on camera, the second you see them both at the same time, it is very clear that there is like tremendous creative chemistry between the two of them. Like, that's what I feel like. It like crackles. Like, it's like watching, two great musicians meet for the first time and like hearing the result of that. Like, they are clearly, their styles work so well together, their storyline works so well. I just thought this was fucking great. I also, man, Ronda Rousey's so fucking good, man. She is like everything that is good about Brock Lesnar, but also way more interesting and is like great on the mic.
Yeah.
And then also,
She's a great character.
Aside from Jericho, she's the only person who just like relentlessly talks shit in the ring. Why don't more people doing that? Oh, it's so good.
I'll show you some wrestling, because the crowd is chanting, "You can't wrestle." She's like, "I'll show you some wrestling." And what does she do? She does Eddie Guerrero's Three Amigos. Like, what could be more taunting to a wrestling crowd? It's just fucking
especially
brilliant.
as they've associated Sasha with Eddie so much.
Right.
Yeah. When you say like two great musicians meeting for the first time, all I can think of is the video that I saw. I can't remember if you linked it to me or I linked it to you, of James Brown and Luciano Pavarotti singing "It's a Man's World" together.
I think you sent that to me. Yeah.
I think I may have sent that to you.
Yeah.
And I saw that and I'm like, there's no way that this is gonna. Then I watched and I'm like, okay, I got it, guys.
Okay, yeah.
Because if two people are good, they'll figure out how to be good together.
And what's so cool about it is, like, Sasha, of all the people who've wrestled Ronda Rousey, Sasha is the most convincing of the idea that pro wrestling can actually defeat MMA. Like, right from the very beginning, Ronda grabs Sasha's arm to put her in an arm bar, and Sasha, like, so fucking smoothly arm drags her out of it.
The number of reversals and stuff, which when that is well executed, that's like one of the most exciting things to see. And there's a couple times where Sasha gets Ronda in an arm bar, which feels like a meta form of when you do somebody's signature move on them and that insulting, where it's like,
totally,
like not just like, oh fuck you, but like, oh fuck the whole world you came from.
Yeah,
like,
right.
you fucking think like that shit doesn't matter here. Which then later on in the match, Ronda Rousey is just like, you know what, fuck it, and just like hunches up in like a boxing position and just starts raining straight up boxing strikes onto Sasha, and Sasha like tries to slap her way out of it.
Yeah.
But Ronda then, it was a funny, that moment for me especially made me think a lot about like the kayfabe of striking, or like how kayfabe deals with striking, because there are a lot of times when I've been like sort of fuzzy on if a wrestler just went into full-on boxing mode. Like, is that legal technically?
Technically, no. Punches to the head are technically illegal. You rarely get disqualified for them.
In the WWE, they've cut back on that. They've said that they're not, but they don't address it very well on screen. Like, sometimes they'll have a wrestler where their finishing move is they just give you a good, right hook in the face, the Big Show's last big finisher was that. It was a good finish for him. He'd show that his fist was as big as your head, then he'd hit you in the head with it.
That will convincingly finish somebody.
Straight punches. Yeah, but traditionally, though, Ben is right. A straight punch to the face is supposed to be illegal in wrestling. It's the big thing that separates boxing from wrestling.
Which makes a lot of sense, because I feel like when you see somebody do this, like the second Ronda Rousey started doing that, I was like, oh, the problem here is that this is a reminder that were they actually fighting, it wouldn't really be a question. It would not really be. You can't do any of this wrestling shit like to somebody in a real fight if they're like just straight up punching you in the throat, like, and they're really good at punching and have trained super hard on how to punch real good.
Right.
Like, if you're an Olympic level judoka, she'll just pick you up and throw you to the ground.
Well, and which there is a. With any of the matches that Rousey does, there is a it's at least it feels like there's a meta statement being made about wrestling versus MMA, and she's constantly trying to prove that she can do this, whereas the other wrestlers also, they have to prove that they could beat somebody quote unquote for real. And then I don't know, it's just interesting. Like the 5 seconds where she throws some punches at Sasha just really got me thinking about like, how does wrestling handle this, and is it worth it when you add in that extra level of, it's like, oh, this is interesting, this is something I wasn't expecting in a match, it's visually something that's kind of different, hey, how is the other wrestler going to handle this? But also, can you go too far and be like, oh, well, now we're breaking the reality, the constructed reality, because this is reminding us that, like, if you could just punch each other in the face, it would be over pretty quick.
Yeah, I don't entirely remember this moment in the match, but
it was very brief.
I'm guessing Sasha gets to the ropes pretty fast.
Sasha's in the corner when this happens.
Oh, yeah. So then that's totally illegal, because you're supposed to break when someone's in the corner.
They do
Unlike
the strike
in
exchange.
MMA.
They do the strike exchange outside, too, in the corner, where Sasha is throwing several... Ronda, rather, is throwing several body blows, and then Sasha moves, and Ronda punches the side of the ring post.
There you go,
Which is a very wrestling thing to do, but it's also a good way to be like, oh, her punches aren't going to work as well now because her hand hurts, because she punched this thing made of LCD screen at this point.
Right, so that's part of the idea, is that the constraints of wrestling are constraints that you don't have in MMA, and that's something Ronda has to work around, and that's going to be a weakness.
And it is kind of interesting. I will say the moment that I was talking about happened a little later than that moment you're talking about, Doc. But that moment also was really, especially like you hear it when she hits
you really
with her
do.
elbow. But I thought it's interesting that it sets up. She does something mildly illegal to Sasha early on, which then makes it okay for later on when Sasha just wraps her friggin' belt or whatever, part of her costume around Ronda's mouth.
Yeah,
she opens up her ring gear. She like takes it apart so that she can wrap some of it around Ronda's throat.
That looked really brutal. About your question about wrestling strikes, I watched a match. I know I brought it up a couple times. I was watching the New Japan Cup, and a match really struck me that I wondered if you would like or not, Evan. And I don't know if we'll get if there's even a place to watch it, but there were two guys that are both in their 50s. It's Minoru Suzuki and Yuji Nagata, and right before the match started, in an opening round match in this tournament, I said, these guys are just going to punch each other in the face, right? And about 80% of the match, which is like 15 minutes, it's just them giving each other forearms and strikes, like to the face and, to the upper body area, while the other ones stagger and doesn't fall over. And all of it is done in their faces and their reactions and their acting, and I thought it was great. But man... it's so hard to do a proper strike exchange in wrestling when there is MMA out there and everybody sees what real deadly strikes look like. But if you can do it within the constraints of pro wrestling and the fans can accept it, it's a beautiful display of brutality.
That's why chops are so big in Japan.
Yeah.
Because they hurt, but they don't really do like that much damage. So you can just do them all over and over again to people.
You'll break the skin eventually.
Yeah. Well, because that's the conundrum of punching and wrestling is that you can't do too, like, a lot of times if there's too much punching and it's wrestling style punching, I hate it because I'm like, this is the dumbest, fakest looking shit ever. I don't like, you can do it for a second, it's fine, but there's some matches where there's so much of it. But then, if you're doing real deal punches to each other, you can't really do a lot of those because if you are a big, strong person and you for real punch another person, you can't do that too many times before there start being some long lasting effects.
Jim Ross often observes, if you put someone in a corner and then you climb up to the second rope and you punch them down while the crowd is counting 10 times in the face, that's a basic spot. And then you get down and then you see the guy's face and there isn't a mark on his face or he's not bleeding or bruised. Well, your punches are weak. And you just showed the crowd your punches are weak. Don't do that. It's just an observation that makes sense, and it's true. Because a real punch to the face is a dangerous thing.
Yeah.
So, speaking of which, Doc, you mentioned Ronda punching the LED board and it going out. That actually also happened in the four-way. They hit the LED board and it went out.
Has anybody here ever been for real punched in the face?
I've been punched in the face a few times.
I got for real punched, but in 6th grade. So I don't know how much damage it necessarily was, but it sucks. It's not fun. It is not fun. Like you see movies
kicked in the face.
Ooh, yeah, that's not good. Yeah. You see movies and you're like, oh, it's not so bad. No, obviously movies aren't real. But yeah, I remember the when I got punched in the face too. It was like a real like, oh shit, like I'm not good at fighting. Like this guy thinks I'm gonna fight him. I don't know what I'm gonna fucking do. And I've somehow managed to avoid it ever since then. There have been a lot of times where I'm like, oh, I'm about to get punched in the face, aren't I? And then I managed to get away before anything happened. But
that's most of the time.
So I was gonna say there's a lot of other callbacks to previous matches in this match that you may have picked up on. That actually there's another callback to that Fatal 4-Way. Sasha tries to pin Ronda exactly the same way she won the Fatal 4-Way. She goes into the crucifix out of the bank statement, but it doesn't work this time.
How much do you think that's a conscious reference and how much just part of Sasha's style and a cool thing that she thinks is cool to do?
I haven't seen her do, from what I remember, I haven't seen her do that very often. Maybe not even another time besides these two.
Well, whether or not it's a callback to that match specifically, she understands that can be a really effective pinning combination for the crowd to see. It looks like you got her. Whether or not you actually win the match is another story, but it looks like you're going to get her. And that's another way that she realizes that it's the people's perception of it. And if she did it then in every match, it wouldn't be the finish unless that would be her finish, but the people would catch on that it's not actually a dangerous pinning combination if you lose with each match. It drives me crazy that Dolph Ziggler does the super kick into the falling on his opponent pin in every match. Because Shawn Michaels did that once, maybe twice in his career, and it was always like he kicked his opponent with the last ounce of strength he had and won the match because he happened to fall on his opponent afterwards. But with Ziggler, it's just the super kick spot.
The other reference is Sasha stomping on Ronda's hand when she's in the bank stand. Which, as far as I remember, only happened in that Sasha versus Bayley match.
Sasha Bayley match.
We watched many episodes ago.
That's a good way to communicate desperation, or stomp somebody's hand.
And I think, to your point, Doc, more than it actually being a reference to the previous matches, Sasha was pulling out all the stops for this match.
Right.
She knew it was her responsibility to have the best fucking match with Ronda Rousey she could possibly have. So
this was her chance with Ronda.
Yeah, she used all of her A material.
I mean, if you really want to know how much the WWE was putting into Ronda Rousey, just think about the fact that she has theme music you have to pay for.
Yes. That's actually a very good point. Almost nobody's pulled that off.
She has theme music that you have to pay for every fucking time you play it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like her and CM Punk got that treatment. Yeah. And Punk, after he got his big contract, he was like, and I want to use Cult of Personality. And they're like, but that costs. And he's like, I want to use Cult of Personality. And so he did. And that was that.
And that, using those songs, when I say expensive, I mean, I would imagine that, what's the name of that fucking song?
A Bad Reputation?
Bad Reputation. That's 10 to 20 grand a pop.
Yeah.
Easy.
One thing I don't understand about the use of the music is on the network. Because, a lot of the time they've had to, use generic music or whatever and and put it over what was there. But fucking Cult of Personality is there for every single CM Punk match. You know,
I think since it's a more modern thing of that, as opposed to them trying to cut out something from their catalog, they probably were more proactive with the paperwork that they registered when they first got a license to use it, to include something having to do with future streaming rights on the internet. Whereas when you're trying to pick out like musical performances from, you know, a show that happened 10, 15 years ago, maybe you can't do it. Now, the famous time that Kiss appeared on Monday Nitro is not on the network, because they hype it up the whole episode, but they don't actually show Kiss's performance, because they're not going to pay what Kiss charges to pull up one of their songs for a 20-year-old episode of a show that was famous at the time for how bad it was. Right. No.
Yeah, WCW, I'm sure, was not thinking forward enough to be like, we're going to want to own this footage.
Watching ECW is tough, because ECW just used whatever music it wanted all the time. Sometimes Paulie had a contract for it. Sometimes he didn't. And, you know, the Sandman's act was 90% coming out to enter Sandman, and he doesn't. They're not going to pay Metallica for that.
I had a Spotify playlist specifically for this purpose when I was watching through all the old ECW hardcore TV.
It might be worth it.
Yeah, I mean, for like 5 or 6 different themes that were really crucial. Enter Sandman being one of them.
Have Natural Born Killers playing through the entirety of the New Jack match.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other thing. New Jack is a whole other story. He had his episode of Dark Side of the Ring. I want to see his episode of Dark Side of the Ring. And like, people are giving New Jack crap for his past, and he just tweets out, yeah, but I didn't murder anybody like everyone else on this show. He has killed several people, but they were all justifiable homicides. So going back to the Ronda-Sasha match, you know, at the end, there's a whole ton of reversals until Ronda finally beats Sasha with the Piper's Pit, the weird Samoan drop type thing she does.
Yeah, Sasha really stretches Ronda in the last few minutes of the match, like puts her in all the holds. It was great to watch.
And then we get something very much like the end of that 4-way at the end of this match, where they shake hands. And then Sasha leaves the ring, and then Ronda goes to shake her hand again. And Sasha shakes her hand, and then holds up the 4 sign for the 4 horsewomen, which is dropping this little seed for something that apparently has been in the works for many years, that eventually we're going to get the 4 horsewomen of WWE against the 4 horsewomen of MMA. And they're all signed to WWE now. So before long, if Marina Shafir and Jessamine Duke can like get a little bit better at wrestling,
yeah, at this point they're like Keith Hart and Bruce Hart in that Survivor Series match.
I will hear no disparaging of Keith Hart.
No disparaging meant of Keith Hart. He
American hero,
quite as Canadian hero.
Sorry, we should look to Canada for our heroes.
That's not a bad idea sometimes.
They what was I going to say? I didn't realize that they were signing more MMA stars.
Yeah, you know, they're now looking for women's wrestlers in all the places they look for men's wrestlers, including various other sports and athletic, you know, endeavors. And a lot of MMA fighters like pro wrestling, and a lot of MMA fighters have careers that are over by the time they're 30 and have plenty of time to do pro wrestling, which you can do. You know, Randy Orton recently said, and this is a common thing for wrestlers of his age and experience to say, is that he watched the guys on NXT and he thinks that they're doing too much because they're going to hurt themselves and then not have long careers. And he said, I'm 40. I plan to wrestle till I'm 50. And a big part of that is how I've made my style not so dangerous all the time. And there's some truth to that.
They signed Shayna Baszler, who's a really good friend of Ronda Rousey's, one of the 4 horsewomen of MMA, but who was an indie wrestler for many years before WWE finally signed her. And she's really good. She's had a little bit of a stumble in her career recently, where like she worked her way to the top of NXT. She was NXT champion. She was dominant as NXT champion. Then they brought her up and had her wrestle Becky Lynch at WrestleMania this year. But the lead up to WrestleMania didn't come out quite the way that they wanted to, and the match was kind of forgettable. And so she's been demoted. I think she'll work her way back up to the top eventually, because she is really talented, but she's got to figure some things out.
being at the top of NXT for men or for women does not guarantee you're going to be on the top of the main roster once you come to the main roster. They're booked by different people. They provide different audiences with different products, and like sometimes they talk like that, and fans will say, "Oh, bullshit. It's all the same stuff." No, not really. Triple H books NXT. He has a lot of autonomy to do so versus Vince, who books the main roster. But it's not like Triple H ever says, well, I don't think they booked the main roster right. He always said it was like when you go to Monday Night Raw, it's like a rock band playing the arenas. And when you play NXT, it's like a rock band playing the clubs. You do a different set list for a different audience, even if it's the same band. And if you play the clubs and then you get big enough to play the arenas, you got to do an arena show. And if you don't know how to do an arena show, you're just going to be playing in the clubs again soon enough. And he's right. And that's how that goes. And I think that Shayna is going to do fine if she sticks around. She'll climb back up. She just has to establish what her arena act is, because she had one hell of a club act. It just hasn't quite translated yet.
This is actually a really good segue for what I want to talk about leading up to our last match that we're discussing today, where Sasha's transition from the clubs to the arenas hasn't been entirely smooth. She's performed really well, and in the premium, we'll cover some of those really good performances. But for some reasons we've already talked about, her injuries and various things, like she hasn't had quite the overwhelming success that Charlotte and Becky Lynch have. Sasha and Bayley both haven't quite had that success. So this Royal Rumble match happens, and it's an incredible match. Sasha's done some really good business for the WWE, getting Ronda ready for WrestleMania. The WrestleMania match is going to be Ronda with Charlotte and Bayley, which Charlotte and Becky, which we've already covered. So what of Sasha and Bayley, the other two top women in the WWE at this time? Well, the fan base has been clamoring for women's tag team titles for a while at this point, and they finally get them. In the Elimination Chamber, the pay-per-view in between the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania, they crown women's tag champions. And that Elimination Chamber match is really good. I think eventually we should cover it, maybe in an Elimination Chamber episode. But anyway, so Bayley and Sasha are the women's tag team champions, and I think they're fairly happy in that role. Being the first women's tag team champions, they come out and they say they're going to defend them on all the rosters. They had like one match on NXT, I think, and they're really looking forward to like establishing the titles with a long run. They get their WrestleMania match booked, 4 teams, tag team 4-way, fatal 4-way match, not elimination, fatal 4-way match, between Sasha and Bayley against the Iconics of Billie Kay and Peyton Royce, the Hall of Famer Beth Phoenix, along with Natalya Neidhart, and then Nia Jax and Tamina. And what happens? They have this kind of like short match early in the WrestleMania card where they're in there with 6 other women, and then they fucking lose the titles only a month after they got them. And Bayley and Sasha were not happy about this at all. Reportedly, they were crying like babies on the floor of the locker room. And they actually referenced that recently because by doing that when they won the tag team titles again. And we'll talk about more about that.
I don't know how much I believe the internet burial of those two at that point. I know that Sasha had to go away and take care of herself. And right. That's fine. I imagine if she was going to do that, they knew she was going to do that, and they may have, taken action. That would be why there was the stunted reign. It certainly did make the act better once they reconvened several months down the line, but all that's backstage gossip. The Iconics were in the middle of a moment, and they were crowned at WrestleMania. If you'd been watching SmackDown at the time, they really were suddenly riding a wave. Their gimmick had gotten over pretty quickly. They were delightful, and I think it was probably the right call to shift the belts to them so that they could have that on their act for a while. And then everyone else chased,
Maybe. I would agree with that, except for the fact that they didn't do shit with the belts after they won them.
Right,
they actually lost them pretty quickly after that. And it's one of these tricky things, right? Like, an act is hot. It has some momentum. Do you want to push it to the moon now or wait and see if it can get even more momentum? I feel like the Iconics now are ready for the tag team titles, but
What is their deal?
I believe
they're
they're
iconic.
they're from New Zealand. They're from New Zealand, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
They're from
not
New Zealand.
Australia. From
They're
New Zealand.
two rather statuesque looking performers, and so they do this thing where they like
They have a
stand
pose.
like Superman and say iconic.
I mean, that's a catchphrase, but really,
they're obnoxious. Is really what their characters
Hmm.
are. And this is one way in which they're super obnoxious by doing that catchphrase over and over again.
Why are there two eyes? Is that because there's two
it's
of them?
because there's two of them.
And
Got-
so they
love
can
it, yeah.
copyright that.
Makes sense.
That's
okay.
a big thing, actually.
Because I enjoyed them as much as I enjoyed anything in this match.
They're very entertaining in how obnoxious
Yes,
they
extremely.
are.
Yes,
They
extremely
really
interesting. Kind of a Wonder Twins, like
Yeah.
powers, lots of powers activate style, dual moves and stuff. It was good. I would have loved to watch a match between any two of these tag teams, any combination of two tag teams but this is beyond a clusterfuck. Like
It's too many people, and because it's an early match on a 7-hour fucking WrestleMania, they didn't give it a ton of time either.
I feel like this match kind of reeks of somebody told them 10 minutes before the match that they had to cut half their match, so instead of being able to structure a newer, shorter match, they just tried to do everything they had already called just faster, which doesn't work. Bring it in again to a band playing if the venue comes to you and says, I know you had 45 minutes, but really you got 30 minutes. Do you cut a few songs or do you just play all your songs faster? Like, no, you got to cut a few songs. Like, it's a drag, but sometimes it happens. This is live entertainment. Everybody has a time window. Sometimes yours gets cut. But it's easier just to cut a few songs than to piece together a logical wrestling match that's a lot shorter.
You see, I disagree. I would go with you want to play all of your songs faster. On an unrelated note, I only listen to one form of music, and it's grindcore.
Apparently the Misfits were doing that for a while. I never saw them do that, but whatever
yes.
band was calling themselves the Misfits at the time is like, we're going to play as many Misfits songs as we can, 30 minutes. And then they'd play 60 Misfits songs.
I was there. We left.
Oh, God, right. You left.
That was at Riverfront Rampage at the baseball stadium, and we left. We heard them playing as we went to the train because we were like, "Oh God, I already don't really like the Misfits that much."
Yeah.
I mean, they're fine, they're great, but yeah.
I'd love to see the Misfits in a club in 1986.
Actually, I saw the Misfits at fucking Psycho Las Vegas Festival last year, the original lineup.
Oh, yeah, I heard that was a lot better.
They were fucking amazing. But yeah, this was like two members of the Misfits, not Danzig.
No.
And two of the lesser known members of the Ramones.
Right. Billy Ramone. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say this is the second time we're talking about Kiss in this episode because
Oh no.
that's because the Misfits are. You know what? There's two. There's if Kiss had written 3 good songs, then
And then
they were a
recorded
little
them
faster,
over and
then they'd
over
be
and
the
over
Misfits,
again.
Yeah.
I would like to
Kiss
say-
have no good songs.
No, they have one good song.
What?
Going Blind. Going Blind is awesome.
Okay, I'll
But
have to. I'll have to look that up.
Evan, your hatred of Kiss is valid, but sometimes I think your hatred of Kiss is a little too all-consuming when it comes up. And I think now that
Well,
you're older,
when- how
maybe you
often
should
do I bring it
downgrade
up?
it to I hate Kiss, but maybe some people like Kiss.
No, it's more now because I have also learned to hate capitalism. And Kiss is the ultimate form of capitalism in rock music. So
is true.
I have more of a hate. And also it's just fun to hate them.
I
that's
do
fine.
prefer the Melvins cover of Going Blind, which is how I discovered the song. But the Kiss version is okay too.
Yeah, I think I like the Misfits a lot because I learned most of the Misfits songs I know just playing them in bands. And then later I heard the recordings. And I was like, it's kind of better when we played it, which I think is really the point of getting into the Misfits, is playing their songs better than they recorded it, which so many bands have done.
So one thing that I'm glad didn't get cut from this women's tag team title match was fucking Natty putting Sasha and Bailey both in the sharpshooter at the same time.
Yeah.
Really
pretty
well,
impressive.
too. She had them fucking hooked in there tight.
If anybody could do it,
Is the other woman that she's wrestling with, is she also a Hart?
No, that's Beth Phoenix. She
Okay.
is she's a Hall of Famer. She's married to Edge.
Good choice.
Yeah, she comes back every once in a while and is still totally in shape and good at wrestling. Yeah, she was one of the top stars. She was kind of the only real wrestler they had, or her and Natty were like the only like legitimate wrestlers they had during the really dark period of the Divas division in the WWE. They were the Divas of Doom together.
Beth could come back whenever she wants. Whenever she does come back, it's welcome. She doesn't, I don't think she wants to like mix it up with the current crop of women like every night, and that's okay. She can be in every Royal Rumble she wants.
She was like the She-Ra of wrestling.
Yeah,
Okay.
very much so.
She wore a tiara and everything.
Man, I was trying to focus on Sasha for this match too and stuff, but I was real checked out for a lot of this match because it was just too much early on. Oh, there was a great moment early where one of the announcers, I think not Paige, I think who's the other announcer?
Paige seemed a little lost on commentary, unfortunately.
Yeah.
There was Michael Cole. Who else was on commentary?
There was another woman, I can't remember her, but I think
Renee Young.
Oh, Renee,
okay,
yeah, of course.
I think it was her. Says at one point, or fairly early in the match, Nia Jax gets thrown into the stairs in a way that looks very painful, and the commentator goes, "Oh my goodness."
Renee Young's strength turned out not to really be on commentary. Like, they put her on commentary because they were desperate to have a woman on commentary.
And people were asking for her to be put on commentary. Like,
For a
people
long
wanted
time,
people wanted a woman commentator. She was excellent at doing backstage interviews and interstitials and live interviews and all that. And people are like, use Renee on commentary. And she was fine.
Yeah. Better than fucking... I'd rather listen to her than fucking Michael Cole or...
Oh, 100%.
But yeah. Fuck, what was I going to say?
That's
This
the
is
thing
the
about
first
this
time
match.
that's ever happened, I think.
Well, oh no, that's what I was going to say. That's exactly. So Evan, you were talking about it, yeah, how you couldn't focus on Sasha. You can't focus on anything. And I think, Doc, you might be right that like there isn't much to the backstage rumors, but I think Sasha and Bayley would be somewhat justified in being upset that they were not given a more prominent role at this point. As prominent as, at the very least, just having a regular tag match for the titles instead of being thrown into a clusterfuck.
Right, not one of these scrambles.
Yeah. So, and so that's what I was pointing out is kind of, this was very much a low point for their careers. Sasha went away for a while. In the meantime, Bayley reinvented herself. When Sasha came back, like, she totally jump-started the division. Like, things were kind of in a lull. Sasha came back. Now, Bayley and Sasha are the tag team champions again. They're both heels on SmackDown, and they are, for me, and I haven't been watching that much WWE content, but I actually watched all of Raw this week, and, like, I've been going in and out. Sasha and Bayley, the Boss and Hug connection, are by far, I mean, that's a terrible name, but notwithstanding the name, they are by far the best act on WWE right now.
Bayley is also the singles SmackDown Women's Champion.
Right.
Every interview they do with them by now is the interviewer nudging them as to like, so when are you guys going to turn on each other? Because they've had several matches against each other, and it's like, so Sasha, you jealous of Bayley because she's got a singles title? And like Sasha, and like they'll talk for each other. It has become like, for a while it was bad, and now it's good because the whole when are they going to turn on each other thing has been going on for years, and it's just not happening through their matches too, because they do both. Talk about when they have like these multi-women matches, they're gonna fight each other and they both want to be the champion, and they'll have matches against brutal matches where they beat the hell out of each other, and then there's still the Boss and Hug connection afterwards.
It was great on Raw. Sasha's like Becky, you have 2 belts. Becky Lynch used to call herself Becky 2 Belts. So Bailey is calling herself Bailey Dose Straps. She's a heel, right? So it's supposed to not be cool.
How is that? How is that coming along? How is Evil Bailey coming along?
Great,
fantastic.
Okay.
Oh man.
So Sasha's
her whole thing, like you still see me as a little girl. I'm 30 years old. Is just that's the encapsulation of the kind of pissed heel Bailey is.
And so Sasha's like, I want to have a taste of what it's like to have 2 titles. And you're thinking like, oh, she's gonna challenge Bailey. So I'm gonna challenge Asuka. And now we're going to get Sasha versus Asuka.
That's pretty great.
Yeah, totally. That's their alliance is an amazing act. And the fact that they're both just such dominant, obnoxious heels about it now is great. You know, they know they can beat you. They've been around.
There was one previous Sasha versus Asuka match, and I think I saw it, and I remember it being pretty good, but it was like a throwaway Raw match. So like, I don't know.
They needed a match that week.
They need a more high-profile meeting because they are my 2 favorite wrestlers, like them and Daniel Bryan, the 3 of them, in the world right now. So I want to see them have a serious match together. A couple other things about the other participants in this match. I really like the Iconics. I remember when Billie Kay was Jessie McKay on the Indies. I saw her wrestle her trainer Madison Eagles on a Shimmer show once, and I think she also trained Peyton Royce, who was Casey Navarro. And there's just this great Australian, New Zealand wrestling scene. We have a ton of women, mostly, now on the NXT roster who have come out of that scene.
Yeah.
Dakota Kai is another one.
It's like I've met several Australian wrestlers and wrestlers that came from like the Australia, New Zealand area, and they're all very frustrated because the whole rest of like the English-speaking world has these huge wrestling scenes. There is wrestling in Australia, but even if you're one of the best, there isn't enough for you to be like a full-time wrestler making money in Australia. So they have to try and do these tours of America. But America is far, and arranging like spending 2 months touring the Indies in America, you'll probably break even if you're good, but you might not, and then you have to put your whole life on hold. And like, so, you know, it's a hardship. There's no major Australian wrestling league. There have been times in history where Australia has been a really hot territory, where wrestling was enormous and plenty of people made a lot of money there. Now is not one of those times, although it does have, as you said, the thriving indie scene. We'll see if anything big ever comes of it. A lot of good wrestlers are coming out of it.
Australia seems to be like a hotbed of creativity in general. Like a lot of great Australian philosophers coming out of the last couple of decades. I don't know.
Oh, cool. Well, you know, Australia's cool. I've never been there. Don't know if I'll ever go. It seems very far.
Far, it's hot.
It's hot.
Spiders everywhere.
Mostly in the middle.
And then, they're on the coasts too.
They're
they
on
know
the
how
coasts,
they can
too.
find you. They know how to find
Boy.
you. And
I guess. Yeah.
No, in New Zealand also. I have nothing of value to say. I was going to start wrapping it up.
That's okay.
So yeah, I mean, before we wrap, like, I do want to say a little bit. You know, we've talked about Nia Jax in previous episodes. She's very talented. Seems to still be working out a little bit of the bugs of her in-ring technique because she keeps hurting people. But I like her a lot. I want her to succeed. Tamina, I also like. She seems like a very nice person. Not a good wrestler, though. Just like really clumsy but they keep using her. And I think there's a few reasons for that. One of them might be because she seems very nice and everyone likes her, I guess. And being cooperative is, you know, I think a lot of fans don't realize how far that'll get you in the wrestling business amongst a bunch of fucking egomaniacs.
Sometimes that's very true.
So that might be part of it. But I think another part of it is I think she's got fucking dirt on Superfly, on her dad, or on Vince's involvement in covering up that murder or some shit, and they're trying to keep her happy. But I don't know. That's pure speculation.
Hey, look, man, if you want to make it in any creative career, you need to do whatever you can do, you know? And if that's,
Right.
You got to use what you got. And if that's time, you spend a lot of time practicing. And if it's proof that your boss helped cover up a murder in the 70s, then you use that.
Yeah, one or the other.
Yeah.
Maybe both.
It's those two things. Those are the two things
Those are
that
the two
people
things.
use to get ahead, is wrestling and murder blackmail. Dad-specific murder blackmail. All right.
So the finish of this match is Beth Phoenix hitting Bayley with the glam slam from the second rope, and then the Iconics come in and take advantage and steal the pin.
It's such a classic dirty heel move. Come in and steal the pin in a multi-man match. Because anybody can pin anybody, and then they can be the vulnerable heels, which is always good.
And then you can set up a feud with the champs. Who,
Yeah.
You know, if the champs weren't pinned. In this case, they were pinned.
Before we wrap up completely, there was a famous finish on Monday Night Raw once of a 4-way tag team match. And
I know what you're talking about.
you know what I'm talking about. This is a story for Evan, and sometimes you might wonder why this specific thing doesn't happen, and it's because there's a rule to prevent it. And there was a match on Raw, a 4-way match for the tag team titles, and I can't remember who else was involved, but the New Age Outlaws, that's Billy Gunn and the Road Dogg Jesse James, they were the tag team champions. And they had started doing these 4-way tag matches very commonly. And one of the spots in it was like, legally, if someone tags in, they have to at least touch their opponent before tagging out. You can't just run and tag out.
But you can tag anyone.
But you can tag anyone from any team, with only 2 people being legal at a time in the ring. Everyone else had to wait in their corner. So a common spot would be the 2 people in the ring would both run over to the heel tag team and tag them both, and then run out of the ring. And they'd both have to get in the ring, and they'd act confused, like, oh no, they have to wrestle. And usually, like, one of them would put the other one in a headlock and maybe throw him off the ropes and do a shoulder tackle. Then they'd argue. They'd both go over to try and tag another tag team that would drop off the apron, and it would deny them that. And then eventually one of them would make the tag. So in this particular 4-way match, the New Age Outlaws were both tagged in. And they both squared off in the middle of the ring, and they looked around, and the announcer's like, oh, they got to touch. They can't just not. And then one of them laid down, the other one pinned him, and they won. It was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. And
Bit of a loophole there.
But yeah, and
So
but
they
you can only
filled
do
that.
that once.
Yeah, they made it official the next week. You can't do that. You just you just can't. It's against the rules. You have to pin at least an opponent of yours. And
I'm so glad
I wanted
they
to
did
say
it the
that.
one time. I'm so glad they
Me
did it
too.
the one time.
It was the
They
greatest.
realized it
Yeah.
and then did it.
They were the perfect team to do it. The disrespectful New Age Outlaws, and they won. So there you go. As far as screwy finishes go.
This point in Sasha's career, she's finally on top of the WWE. Like, she and Bayley together are the top act in the company. It took a while, but they're there. And I'm really excited to see where they go from here.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I will have to check in and see what's going on and watch
sounds
some
good.
more Sasha stuff, because I enjoyed I like her pretty much as I have liked anybody.
One thing she's become known for is, like, she did a lot of, like, the first ever women's this or that, like the first ever Hell in a Cell, the first ever Iron Man, things like that. So in the premium, we're going to watch her against each of the other horsewomen, all in a different, like, gimmick match.
Cool.
2 of them being the first one ever and the other one being, like, the second one. So you can look forward to that. Listeners, subscribe to our Patreon, $5 a month. If you can afford to, and if your money, if you can afford to, after donating to the very important political causes right now that we support, the protest movement and all of that. But
You'll see a few links, I'm sure.
Absolutely. That's
patreon.com/contesting wrestling.
You can also follow us on Twitter @contestingw. Let us know if you have thoughts, feelings, questions, concerns. If you think there's anything that we should cover. Let
us know if you don't have thoughts and feelings, at all. That would be really interesting to know.
If you're
Yes.
if you are a void, then you're probably already on Twitter. First off,
We probably listen to a lot of the same bands. I'd like to talk to you.
Yeah, if you're somebody who like Sun O still has too much songwriting structure for me, I need to just hear drones feedback.
I know those people.
Oh man.
But yeah, this has been Contesting Wrestling. We appreciate you very much. We hope you have enjoyed this. Let us know if you have, or if you haven't, or whatever. It's fine. And then also, yes, please make sure to check the show notes to see links to some various causes that you should donate your time, money, effort into. All of that. And yeah, this has been Contesting Wrestling. We love you. Thank you.